And welcome everybody to God's Views on Political News. It's so great to have you here today. I just have to say, nobody knows this. It's my birthday, so it's even more of a special day. So
Oh, well, happy birthday.
thank you, thank you.
Yesterday was Alan's birthday. He turned 16 years old. How old are you? Never mind.
I'm 16 in my own mind. Okay.
Yeah. Well, I'm a little older than you. I'm 19 in my mind. So.
Oh, there's always people like us, you know. Well, people are coming in. Hey, Robin, good to see you. Welcome everybody. Come on in. And Alan's here. Other people are coming in. Bill, what have you been up to? I know you don't look like you're in Tennessee right now. I don't know where you're at, but
no, I'm in Palm Beach, Florida. I have been here since Thursday night, and there was another gala held at Mar-a-Lago this past Saturday night. All but one of our sons, our entire family was there. We had months ago, Brandon and Melody had been asked to actually sing at this particular event, and at one point it didn't look like it was going to happen. It was kind of touch and go there for a little while, but about 3 weeks ago, everything started coming together. So we came down to support them because they were, honored, nervous, what in the world's going on, that kind of a thing.
And they're great, by the way. If you've never heard Brandon and Melody sing, you need to. And Melody is on a YouTube channel. Is it just Melody Joy? She's amazing, amazing voice.
I don't know if she changed it to Melody Joy Cloud or not, but Melody Joy you should be able to pull it up. And so our whole family came down. Alan and Allison got to get all dressed up. Alan was in his little tux, and he got to be an attendant and everything. And I was asked to give a speech at the event. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm in the hotel room, and hello, I'm on the.
Well, important calls he has to take.
Can I call you back in just a moment? All right, thank you. All right, sorry about that, y'all. Hey, live thing going on here. Live event. Anyway, I was asked to speak to the gala, and I have to tell you, Susan, that I've been speaking in front of people for a couple of decades now,
and we lost Bill.
What?
Hopefully he'll come right back. This is just great. He gets a phone call. He's telling us what he's done. It's pretty amazing. And then off he goes, and the camera shuts off. So hopefully he will be right back. I'm hoping. Thank you, everybody who's coming in and wishing me happy birthday. I gave a shameless plug at the beginning of the show, and now we have Bill back. So the powers that be are trying to keep you from telling us anything.
I don't know what happened. I could see me. I could hear you. Anyway, I spoke. It was a very exciting event. There were several hundred people there, including UN ambassadors, high-profile Jewish dignitaries, rabbis, high-profile evangelists. People who are very, very close to the president. And so to say I was nervous is an understatement. I was as nervous as a long-tailed cat in a room full of rocking chairs. So,
and if you're not from the South, I think you still know what that means.
Okay. Anyway, all of that is to say that we've been talking about, we've got to go beyond talking about these things, this state of affairs in our country, what's going on, and do something. And so the Lord, Beth and I are believing, we're convinced at this point that the Lord has opened this door and kind of shoved us through it. I promise you, we did not long to go through it. We did it with much trepidation, but it seems like he has shoved us through this door and is going to put us in front of people with the idea of influencing them the best we can to, number one, stand by the fact that we need to return this country to Judeo-Christian values, those biblical principles the nation was founded upon, to seek out and support candidates who will embrace that same mindset and commitment, and who also are staunchly pro-Israel, recognizing that not only are they our closest ally, but the United States and Israel are unique in that one country, Israel, was called by God to enter into covenant with him and the United States because the early Americans pleaded with God to enter into covenant with them. In fact, that was the essence of the speech that I gave to the group there. So anyway, that's what's been going on over the last week for me, and I'm still in Palm Beach. We had meetings yesterday with some very interesting and influential people. Today, there will be other meetings. Tomorrow, there'll be more meetings, and Beth and the kids had to go on back home and feed animals and, and take care of life on the farm. And I'm still down here in Palm Beach trying to just, Lord, I'm here, Hineni in Hebrew. Here I am. So we're just seeing what's going to happen.
See, I've been wondering where my husband and I be thinking about. We have to leave California, so maybe Palm Beach. I said it has to be by a beach.
well, bring your pocketbook. And
I know.
Save
One
your
reason
penny.
I'm not there. Yes. I'm not the president, so that's why I'm not there. But that's great news, and also please everybody be praying for Bill and what he's going to be doing, and for his entire family, because this is. This is something God has called him to do. I think, I put together this program and asked Bill to be on this program. And I think there was a reason for that as well. And getting Bill more involved in politics, that he wasn't as involved as he was.
It's all your fault, Susan.
So, this is really great news. And this is what we should all be doing, when God has called us to do, making sure that it is from God to do it and then move forward with it. There's no time like the present. Well,
politics is a snake pit. I don't think anybody would argue that. I don't even think politicians would argue with that. But and so for that reason, Susan, I've been very, 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 very hesitant to get involved with anything political, if you will. I have a political opinion. I vote, and I just haven't gotten involved with the politics of things, but I've just been convicted about the fact that, if we don't do something, if we don't take a stand, and if we don't muster the courage to lay it all on the line, then you see what's going to happen. The Omars, the Tlaibs, those people are going to continue to grow in mass because they have an agenda. They're dedicated to it. They're committed to it, and they're ferocious in carrying it out. And so it seems the time has come. This is what I told the group the other night, and this is going to, this applies to what you and I talk about every week. This is our Maccabee moment. And if you're not familiar with what I mean, the story of Hanukkah is about a small group of people who said, basically, that's enough. We've had enough. And they stood up. They resisted the tyranny that was trying, to keep them under thumb. They said, we've had enough. And they started to fight back against it. The fight here, obviously, is not with, swords, but with words, with action, with the dedication to the founding principles of this country. Biblical. When I say that, I mean the biblical principles upon which it was founded. And so this is our Maccabee moment. This is time for us to get involved and do something. My friend Dina Dye, I reached out to her and her husband to be here. They were here with us. And we suspect that my wife just came on. We suspect that she's going to be getting involved with this too. Some other friends that are in spiritual terms are in influential situations. We're reaching out to them to get them more involved. There's something you and I were talking about very briefly before we came on air that we can't go into details right now, but we'll be talking about a little bit later. Things are happening, folks. Things are happening. This is not the time to become despondent, discouraged. I realize every day there's stuff out there that makes you think there's no way, we can't do this. But we need to have the spirit that Caleb had and says, you know what? The Lord has spoken to us. We can do this. Moses told the children of Israel, be strong and of good courage. Don't be afraid of them. Don't just be discouraged by them, because the Lord your God goes before you. And with my whole heart, I believe that if we stand up for what is right, what is virtuous, what is true, and we keep the creator of all things in the center of everything we do, our individual lives, our family lives, and even something like this. We can be assured that even though we may have to endure hardship, sacrifice, loss, he goes before us and he fights the battle for us. And that's where I'm at today. And we're in it. My family's in it. And let me tell you this story, and I'm going to pitch it back over to you so we can get to talking about the topics of the day. But, we were supposed to leave here on Sunday, and it turned into Monday. And yesterday, some things developed, and people called on me, is there any way you can stay? I think you'd be an asset if you could stay. I know you got things going on. We're not going to pressure you, but it'd be great if you could. And so my whole family, we met in the hotel room, and I said, I just need to know what you say, what you think. And every one of them, said, we think you should do this. We think you should stay and try to do this. And so I just want everybody to know this isn't just Bill. This is Bill and Beth and Brandon and Melody and Alan and Allison. We're all, to some degree or the other, as a family, we're committing to this is the time to take a stand. And each and every one of us in our world, however the Father opens up doors for us, he will do it if we're willing to come to him and say, hey, Nanny, here I am. You've been doing that for years, Susan, on your other different programs. And I say this to you, that there are some things that are in the works, the things that you've been dreaming about, you've been longing for. Those things, I believe, we have the potential for those things to come to pass. And we all need to be steadfast. We need to be committed. We need to be faithful. And we need to be courageous.
Amen. Amen. I'm just reading some of the comments here too. Bill, I was talking about on my show this morning when people were talking about what's coming and what people are going to be expecting and how people are going to want you to renounce Jesus and all that. And I said this morning very clearly, I stand for Jesus. I will never renounce Jesus Christ. I am ready for what God has for me to do because I know that we are here at that time and there will be no other time but now. And so as what you've been talking about, I am as prepared for what's to come as you can be. When God opens the doors, I want to walk through it and I don't want to let God down in doing so. Thank you, everybody, for telling me happy birthday. Glad Bethany got home. I see she got home and wished me a happy birthday. Thank you, Bethany. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for the kind words. Shannon said you both are an inspiration for us to do something. Thank you. And thank you, guys. And you are an inspiration for us. The reason that we come here every Tuesday, because you inspire us to be better and to do what God is calling us to do. So thank you for that. Rosanna here is from Montana. Thank you, everybody, for being here.
Rosanna from Montana.
Rosanna from Montana. Yeah, can't get any better than that.
That's classic right there.
Absolutely. So I thank you for the happy birthday wishes again. Thank you. I want to talk a little bit about New Zealand because it's kind of the things that have been happening, the things that are being brought out. I don't know if I know you've been busy, but I'm sure you've heard about what happened in New Zealand with this deranged, and he's not, by deranged, I don't mean that he doesn't know what he's doing and what he did, but this brutal, deranged, I guess, human being, I'm not sure, walked into a mosque, killed 49 people. Now 50 have died altogether, from what I understand. I unfortunately watched some of the video. It was evil in every aspect of the word. You could see what was happening from his vantage point, just as if you were watching a video game of killing people. And this guy went in, and the people he had already killed, allegedly, he went back to and shot into their bodies again. I mean, there's not words to describe this person. And then he goes outside, and a woman who is walking, just happens to be walking on the sidewalk. Don't know if she was going to the mosque or just happened to be wrong place, wrong time. He shoots her. She falls down. She's calling out for help. And he goes out point blank, shoots her, and kills her. a lot has come out of that. And before I go forward, I just want to kind of know your feelings, Bill, about, what happened and your thoughts about all that.
Well, I mean, murder is murder. It doesn't matter who's on the receiving end of it. It's murderous. It's evil. It's satanic. And even though, we certainly have differences with the Islamic world, there's still, when you get right down to it, they're individuals that God created. He breathed the breath of life into him, and nobody has the right to take that away from them. And so, our hearts and thoughts go out with families that are devastated by the fact they've lost loved ones at the hands of a maniac. And, when someone dies, whatever the reason, it's tragic, sad, all those things. But when it doesn't have to happen, that's the real tragedy. And there's a Jewish concept idea, I guess you'd say, that when someone dies or when someone takes someone else's life, they didn't just kill that person. They killed a world, because they killed their progeny. They killed their descendants. They killed their grandchildren, their great-grandchildren, and, generations. And if you think about it, it's really true. They're murdering tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people when they take one life. And so when 50 people are killed, it's multiplied in terms of what could have been. So it's just a great tragedy. There are other tragedies that are emanating from this and developing out of this situation that, some of these sleazy politicians use every opportunity they can to advance, whatever their agenda of the day may be. So they're going to, in my view anyway, they're going to compound the tragedy by trying to make it about something else at this point.
Yeah, when you look at that and you see what this person did and how much damage that he did and destruction in the world, and not just these people, but certainly these people, it's amazing that somebody could be, so evil. And as to go in and kill unarmed people, it's bad enough, you go in, but to take them when they're praying, whether you agree with who they were praying to or anything else, but unarmed people that he knew were defenseless. I mean, what a cowardice act is that?
Well, it is. I mean, that's exactly what it is. And might we point out that, and it doesn't take away from the gravity of it. It just kind of amplifies the argument that's going on right now in this country. There are places that these kinds of people know that the people are unarmed, and those are the kinds of places that they're going to target. Places of worship, they're going to assume that most of those, people are unarmed.
Right.
Schools, they know that most of the people are unarmed. But, as some would have, there are some people in this country who would have everybody in that kind of very vulnerable position. So it just kind of amplifies some things that are going on here. It is tragic that these people didn't have an opportunity to defend themselves. And frankly, this is just Bill's opinion, but frankly, to some degree, governments are responsible for that as well.
Do you want to expound on that? Or?
Well, my understanding is that in Australia, New Zealand, the things that are being argued right now in the United States revolving around the Second Amendment years ago, those governments there made the decision to just basically, and this is my paraphrase, take everybody's guns away, to make it extremely difficult to be able to have a firearm in those countries. I don't think it's completely banned in New Zealand, but I think in Australia and New Zealand it's extremely difficult to obtain a firearm. That's my understanding. So, governments all over the world are on the mantra of we don't need guns in our society, and they'll use things like this to make the argument. But it's, over here, they're wanting to strip our firearms away from us, so that we are vulnerable to those kinds of things, and we'll become even more vulnerable. So what I'm saying is that in some cases, not every case, but in some cases, governments can be complicit in this kind of a tragedy, because they put people in a vulnerable position. I'm not saying that these, people that were murdered in Christchurch, New Zealand, fall under that classification necessarily. I'm just saying that, and what happened there is now being used by liberals in Australia and New Zealand, and it's resonating over here into the United States to be used by liberals and progressives to say, here's what's going on, and we need to stop this kind of stuff from happening in our country. You know what's going on.
Yeah. Well, and the prime minister in New Zealand said it's been about 9 days now, she's going to have a new rule on gun control. She said it's time for this to happen. This was just something that a couple of years ago they tried to do this, and now it's happening, and we're going to go ahead and we're going to have new gun control rules out. People in New Zealand right now are voluntarily turning in their AR-15s because they've been convinced that you don't need it. And if you just turn them in, things like this are never going to happen again. I know.
Well, and that's what I'm saying. Governments become complicit in this kind of stuff. They don't prevent it; they accentuate it. They ensure that things like this are going to happen again. And one of the things that thankfully, the framers and founders of this nation understood that the Second Amendment was not about hunting and all those kinds of things. It was about counterbalancing those who would obtain power in government and try to use that power to lord over the people. If the people were equipped and armed, that would be a counterbalance to those who would want to misuse power. They knew that. That's exactly what the Second Amendment is all about.
Yeah, it's so that you won't be the hunted is basically what it is.
Right.
And it should be known that this woman, this prime minister, is a socialist Democrat and progressive. She's probably a quote, small g god to some of the progressives in America that look up to her and say, wow, I love the way you're doing this. And we like what you're doing. Maybe they'll model after that, in the House. I mean, the House already is saying, this is Nadler, who is on the House Judiciary, is basically saying that because of what happened in New Zealand and the rise in white nationalism, we're going to start having hearings over here in the United States.
Right.
So it's not happening in the U.S. It happened outside of the U.S., but we're going to take that and use it in the U.S. Just exactly what you were saying. Exactly.
We're going to use that as a springboard to once again advance our agenda, which, and this is kind of apples and oranges, and I don't want to get off topic, but in my mind, we're going to take things that are going on in a different hemisphere and use that as grounds to advance legislation in our country. So what happens if something, that the progressives embrace support happens in Saudi Arabia or Iran or Afghanistan? Oh, yeah, because it happens here, we're going to use that as basis to try to push forth legislation here. In other words, using the model, the precedent established in other nations in order to pass laws that will bind and limit Americans and their freedoms and liberties because of what's going on in these other countries. You understand what I'm trying to say?
I absolutely do. And one of the things too that had a discussion the other day, that we worry in America about our Second Amendment rights being taken from us. We worry in America about somebody showing up at our door and saying, I'm taking your guns, turn them in. And my response is, we don't have to necessarily worry about that, although we do. But what the bigger threat to us that we're not even aware of is that one child at a time is what they're using to take our Second Amendment rights away. What I mean by that is in public schools, in society in general, children are being brainwashed. Your grandchildren are going to be brainwashed, and on and on and on, that guns are bad, that you should not have guns, that your parents who do have guns are, a little bit weird, and perhaps you should talk to them about getting their guns. So they're going to use children and brainwash children over and over to eventually, they won't have to come and get your guns. They won't be here if they have their way, is what I'm saying, the progressives.
Well, yeah, they're using a lot of different avenues to try to identify who has them, through children. In fact, this happened a couple of years ago. Beth took one of our kids into a pediatrician. I don't remember what the situation was, but it was a new patient, and so they're filling out the forms. And one of the questions they asked was, "Do you have firearms in your home?" And so Beth said, "Why is that any of your business?" And she says, "I'm not going to answer that question. Are you going to refuse care?" Of course, they couldn't, but it's just very subtle. It was, well, I don't know, maybe that wasn't so subtle, but you understand what I'm trying to say.
Right.
They're going through all these different channels to try to identify who has firearms and to plant that seed in everyone's mind that having a firearm is, you're not right, you're abnormal, you're aggressive, you're potentially violent, even to the degree that our men and women coming back from overseas that have been serving in a combat zone, particularly in the Middle East, that they are potentially aggressive and violent. We need to make sure that we keep an eye on these kinds of people. And these are the ones that we put on the front lines to defend our country. It's crazy.
Linda said just about to say the same thing. Doctors do ask. Bethany says, I told him it's none ya, like none your business. Lisa said, yes, indoctrination of children like Hitler happening here. Also ignoring Gaza's attack on Tel Aviv in the news and everything else. My thought, the word progressive should actually be regressive. There is no pro to it, but that's just my thought, Nancy said. Absolutely. Jonathan said, it's time for the sons of God to start functioning in our purpose. Brenda Liz said they'll find a way to blame Trump, because with New Zealand, they've already blamed President Trump for what happened in New Zealand. Oh, it's the way you talk about things and what you say. It's so insane.
It is insanity. I was thinking about this weekend, and you and I we've talked about this a few times over the years. Progressives and liberals and the AOCs and the Nancy Pelosi's of the world took someone, myself, who was not really for Trump and has turned him into a Trump fan. The more they run their mouth, the more I'm going to support this guy, because it's just become obvious that, well, anyway.
No, but it's true. It's true. I mean, I even heard Glenn Beck supporting President Trump, and what would happen if President Trump didn't win? What would happen to our republic? I almost fell over, because he was very anti-Trump in the beginning. So things change. Jonathan said that's why we need to train up your children to fear of the Lord, for it is the beginning of wisdom. Vicky said they are taking the kids out of school and busing them to protests. No teachers, no parents, no chaperones whatsoever. How is that considered a field trip? And they use climate change to do that. That's how they're going to, if anything happens around the world, we can always have climate change to make changes here in the United States, because of things that are happening outside of our country. I mean, they're really already doing that. But here's one thing that you should consider, Bill, and this will freak you out, but not really, is that if what happened in New Zealand, if that had happened here in California, there would be no death penalty for that. So California has gotten rid of their death penalty. So that would have been maybe life in prison, or maybe not.
Yeah, I think Kamala Harris said something along the lines that there is absolutely no scenario that merits the death penalty in this nation. You know what? I'll go out on a limb and I'll predict that she'll reverse course on that if it involves somebody that is a freedom-loving, God-fearing, Bible-carrying American. If she would find a reason, well, we can make an exception there. That's just Bill's opinion. I'm just thinking out loud.
Well, it's really, it's really frightening. And other things that, that kind of came out of the whole thing with New Zealand. One, he tried to blame Candace Owens for that, trying to create chaos, trying to point fingers at conservatives that he probably doesn't even know, probably doesn't even care about, but is trying to bring about, I think, further destruction in America, because the person is kind of an individual who's very destructive, by nature. But what also came out of it is we saw an Australian politician who was speaking and saying that, it was so bad. He denounced everything that happened, because it was horrible. And he's right. It absolutely horrible. No excuse for what happened. I don't care if you believe in what these people believe in or not. You know, human beings were murdered, and that's
right.
it.
That's right.
And he denounced that. And then he said, but one of the things that may have sort of led to this was the fact that people are afraid of what's happening in their community with radical Muslims moving in, or other people who kind of want to take over.
Yeah, I read about that. And boy, I'm about to step in it. Maybe there is some truth to that. It's just, that's not to justify anything this guy did. He murdered people. That's wrong, period. There's no justification for it. And yet there is this
Bill got frozen out again.
And did I lose you again?
Oh, there you go. Now you're back.
All right. Well, anyway. I was just saying that, there is, I'm not trying to justify anything. Please don't misunderstand me, but I can't disagree with this position completely either. There is a cause and effect in some situations. There is this Islamic influx, and I'm not saying these people that were murdered were part of it, but there are those among the Islamists that are coming into these different countries that are here to radicalize, that are here to subvert. That is a truth,
And he was speaking his truth, and people that he had talked to, and that's how they felt. He was speaking the truth. There were some people who believed that when the person they call Egg Boy, now they just gonna refer to him as Egg Boy, this 17-year-old came up, was filming everything because he wanted to, I guess, be a hero that day or whatever. Just happened to be walking around with a raw egg, and broke it over this Australian politician's head. People were justifying what that guy did, what the 17-year-old did, and saying, well, but look what the Australian guy was saying. It was so horrible what he was saying. Well, we're turning into that world,
Yeah, I know. And of course, good for him. He maybe he might that Egg Boy think twice about it before he does it again. I don't know. But you can't speak the truth anymore without somebody being offended. Of course, now they pick and choose what they want to be offended about.
Right. Well, people were saying, when he turned around, he punched this kid. Well, first of all, it's a natural reaction when somebody does something to you behind your back, as this 17-year-old did, that you're going to turn around and try to defend yourself. And he didn't actually punch the kid. He slapped him in the face, which I'm surprised that's all he did. And people also, when somebody hits you, you're not going to stand there and ask them, oh, excuse me, are you an adult? Because I want to make sure before I hit you that you're an adult.
Right.
But we've made this Egg Boy into a hero, because he went against something that I guess the majority of people maybe in New Zealand didn't like, and other people. And so we've turned this person who committed a battery upon a human being, we're raising that person up as the hero. So much so that there was a GoFundMe, probably still is, because he got arrested and charged for a crime for hitting, somebody over the head with whatever object. So they raised a GoFundMe of like $42,000 the last time I looked.
I'm just thinking what my dad would have done. And I can't say what it would be. But, it's just, it's lucky Egg Boy got away with just a slap, Yeah, I mean, some of these kids, if they're going to act like adults, they need to be treated like adults. And if they're going to go out and do something stupid like that, someday, and I'm not saying it's right, but one day somebody's going to go too far and somebody's going to get really hurt, and it's going to be permanent. That, again, I'm not justifying it. I'm just saying you don't continue poking and expect that nobody's going to punch back. Anyway.
And Linda said, sorry, but next time he may carry a gun. He also didn't know, the Australian politician, he didn't know what that human being who was standing there. Again, I don't know if he knew he was a kid or not. That person standing there, I don't know if he knew that he was armed or not. And Darlene had said that I think she said that he slapped him, and the kid tried to fight him with one hand because he was filming with his phone. So that's why it kept going. Linda said woodshed, and Darlene said, the kid deserved it. Jonathan said, teach us to hide your word in our hearts, Lord, that we may not sin against you. And again, why are we today in our society? And I kind of know the answer before I ask, but we're turning people who shouldn't be heroes into heroes. We're not teaching people anymore in some places and in some communities, and even in the United States, we're not teaching about respect of others, not committing crimes against others, even if we have a differing of opinion. And I know in New Zealand, they don't have a First Amendment, but that doesn't excuse you going after somebody because you don't like what they're saying, because it's against what you think.
Right. Well, we're honoring rebels.
Yes.
You think of David Hogg, a foul-mouthed punk, but because he happened to go to a school that was attacked by another maniac, the left secular society put this foul-mouthed punk on a pedestal and honored him. What school did he end up going to? Harvard, Yale, something like that. Even though he couldn't really, didn't really have the scores to justify it. And so then along comes this guy, and he's doing the same, something just as rebellious and punk like. And so he's going to be honored for that. And then we've got this, I'm trying to think of the proper word used in public. We've got this legislator, representative that wants the voting age to be lowered to 16. And even my 16-year-old son, who is as politically aware as any 16-year-old I know, and in fact, more so than a lot of 20-somethings I've run into, even he said, no, that's stupid. You don't give 16-year-olds. All right, so we're honoring and venerating rebels that are children. They're childish, and we're elevating that. So so what it reminds me of, and I know this is probably going to be a stretch for some, but it reminds me of what we read in the very beginning in Genesis about a guy by the name of Nimrod, whose name means rebel. And he was a rebel in the face of God. And so this is what we're doing. We're honoring these people. We're venerating, and I use that word kind of broadly, these young punks who are nothing more than rebels who need to be taken out behind the house. Somebody get a belt and wear their behinds out. That's what I think should happen. All right, so I'll hush.
Yeah, except in California, where you're not allowed to touch your kids for any reason.
Oh yeah, somebody said butt whippings are illegal now. Well, yeah. Well, okay.
Yeah, that'll get your kids taken away from you in California. So that day is gone. Here anyway. But it's funny because this is what happens when you stray away from right and wrong, where you don't have a guidepost, to say, if you go beyond this, it's wrong. If you're over here, it's right. So we're not allowed anymore to distinguish between right and wrong, good and bad. It's kind of like a continuum. And it means that some people will accept things like Egg Boy, what he did, but they won't accept something over here a little bit more egregious. And then, murder is off the table. But there's something in between the two that now you've gone a little bit too far. But, if we went back to principles where we knew what was right and wrong, we wouldn't be having these problems. We wouldn't be running into this. No. And we wouldn't be creating heroes out of those people who break the law.
Well, we're certainly not doing these kids any favors by I don't know,
by not teaching them,
endorsing their misbehavior and their rebellion. Yeah. They were just making life for them a lot more difficult later on, because eventually one day their rebellion is going to blow up in their face. I don't know how, don't know when, but eventually it will. That's not Bill predicting something. That is a universal law that is introduced to us through Scripture. That's what's going to happen.
Well, and then the real hero in this case was the guy who had a gun with him. and was stopping the shooter. I guess the shooter maybe dropped his gun or something. I don't know exactly what happened, but this man, a 48-year-old man, threw a gun against the window, threw his gun against the window of the car of the shooter. And I guess the shooter thought he was being fired upon, so he left. That guy stopped people from dying inside the mosque, in another mosque that he was going to. And so, that guy's the real hero, but you barely heard anything about him. It was more focused on the egg boy. I don't know of anybody who went out and did a GoFundMe for the real hero in all of this.
Yeah, well,
it's shame. It's a shame.
It's our world is full of, those kinds of situations, and the media, apparently all over the world, is. I don't think they're smart enough to get together and coordinate all of this. It's just something that obviously is buried deep within all of their hearts. And I'm saying collectively. I know that there are individuals that are different, but just collectively, they have sold their soul out to something that is just, it's almost like they have no connection with reality and truth whatsoever. It's amazing to me.
Well, it's also, I think we live not in a bubble, but, in the United States, we tend to think that everything is just happening here in the U.S. And that it was a little bit surprising to me to find out that New Zealand's views about something like this, that I'm thinking, wow, this is kind of like where our society is today. It's parallel with that. I thought New Zealand, to be honest with you, would be a little bit more reserved and a little bit more respectful in how they treat other people. And this may have happened in Australia, and I even with the politician. And I even think that I thought Australia was a little bit different than that. But you find out that it's a smaller world than you thought it was, that they're having the same problems sometimes in other parts of the world.
Yeah, I think it's kind of universal. I mean, obviously there's some places you can go that are more conservative, a little bit more logical, reasonable in their thinking. But those places usually are more rural,
yeah.
Frankly, more agrarian based cultures, because, if you think about it, I know this is kind of seems to be straying off just a little bit, but if you think about it, people who have to go out and work in the dirt every day are faced with reality.
Yes.
This is the way things grow. You have to do this. This has to be present. You have to keep the weeds out. You have to keep the rodents and the predators away. And you have to do whatever you're going to do if you're going to eat and survive. And so every day, agrarian-based societies have to deal with reality. When we get up into high rises and, and country clubs and, these elite enclaves, I don't think they deal with reality as much as people who are out there in these other kinds of situations. Now, that's just my opinion, but by the way, based on things we see in Scripture.
Exactly.
And so what I guess I'm trying to say here is, the things that are going on in the United States are not exclusive to the United States. However, the difference, as far as I'm concerned, is that I don't think in New Zealand's or Australia's history there's anything on record that suggests that the people who founded Australia, New Zealand, and some of these other countries at the inception said, God, we want you to enter into covenant with us.
Yeah.
There's the difference. And that's why we are paying, I think, such a higher price for ignoring that and turning our backs on that. And it's, because evil's everywhere. Wickedness is everywhere. It's just the ramifications of it are intensified when you've got a people that are turning their backs on the covenant that they made with the Creator of all things. Israel's history is, replete with this. Right. So, anyway, I'm rambling, but that's how I see it.
But, also when you're talking about Israel, let's talk a little bit about Rashida Tlaib. We tend to focus on Ilhan Omar and we think, so anti-Semitism is coming out of her. There's going to be a resolution, from the House kind of rebuking her for anti-Semitism. And after Linda Sarsour and CARE paid a visit over there to Congress, suddenly we didn't have a resolution with Ilhan Omar's name in it. But we can't forget about Rashida Tlaib and what she does. Now, recently, there's a school in California. It's Pitzer College. Never heard of them, to be honest with you. I think it's probably a small college up in the Los Angeles area. But there were, and this is going to shock you, Bill, left-leaning faculty at this college. And they got together and I know, can you believe? They wanted to boycott Israel. They wanted to do that by not allowing their kids to have, to study abroad. So any of the college students, they didn't want them to go to Israel. They wanted them to stay here, cut off Israel altogether. And they wanted to withhold them. So Rashida gets involved, of course, and she's supportive of them. Why? Because the college is saying, we don't like the way that Israel treats Palestinians. And so therefore, this is what we want to do. This is what why we want to boycott them. Now, Rashida went one step further and said, you know what? I'm all for a complete boycott of Israel, not just keeping our students the students in college, Pitzer College here and not going to Israel, but let's just boycott them 100% altogether. Any thoughts that you may have?
Well, Rashida Tlaib is vulgar, foul-mouthed. I'm trying to find some polite words.
Were those the good points or the bad? I'm not really sure. About Rashida Tlaib. Yeah.
Let me put it this way. I believe that, and I know that there are people who say, well, we've got Muslims who are not as radical and they're kind of moderate and they're friendly and they're kind and things like that. Yeah, I get it. Okay. There are Christians that are friendly and kind and not radical either. All right. But there are a lot of Christians who have no idea what the Bible says.
Yeah, it's true.
Okay. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely.
May I make the argument there are a lot of Muslims who don't know what the Quran says?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
They know what their clerics tell them, just like some Christians know what their pastor or their priest tells them. Mm-hmm. And they are more inclined to just kind of go with the flow and just kind of mix in with everybody. And let's all be happy, and etc. All right, my point is this. Osama bin Laden was a good Muslim. Mm-hmm. Ilhan Omar is a good Muslim. Mm-hmm. Rashida Tlaib is a good Muslim. You understand what I'm saying?
I do.
So that's what we have going on here. And right now it's these two women. But if we don't stand up and, well, let me back up. If we don't get our individual lives in concert with the Father's will in our families, if we don't take action, if we don't stand up and resist this kind of stuff, then the Rashida Tlaibs and what they want will become a reality. And there'll be more and more Rashida Tlaibs. There'll be more and more Ilhan Omars, and there'll be more and more Keith Ellisons, and on and on and on we go. I mean, right now, these two women and their cohorts and their allies in the Congress have Nancy Pelosi back on her heels. Mm-hmm. This woman who is, to her credit, and I don't give her credit for a whole lot, mind you, but to her credit, has never really seemed to back down from just speaking her mind, particularly when she wants to advance some progressive, godless agenda. But it seems to me that these people have got her very concerned and worried.
They absolutely do. Now, Nancy said you must read and study the Word of God for self prayerfully daily. Absolutely. Darlene said they are also lukewarm and will never stand up against the radicals either. I guess meaning the Democrats there. Bethany says first the Saturday people, then the Sunday people. Wake up, America. Absolutely. Brenda Liz said college is becoming a boot camp for progressive militants who will destroy our republic. Sounds like early Germany. It is really scary. But I will have to say, now you would think because this is California, that they would absolutely just go along with it. The president of the college said, no, we are not going to boycott Israel. We are standing with Israel. If I were going to send a kid anywhere, I wouldn't send him to Pitzer College because of just the faculty there. But thank God for the president of the college, who basically would not go along with what's happening. And you're right. I mean, it takes pressure like this to get one college and then another and a business and, continually keep going. Look, for example, what they've done to Judge Jeanine. She questioned whether or not, with Ilhan Omar wearing her hijab, if she was more prone to follow Sharia law than she was the United States constitutional law. And from what I'm hearing from people, they said that Shepard Smith, Brett Baer were all for getting her suspended, and she's been suspended. She's already missed one Saturday. I understand that it's 2 Saturdays that she's going to miss for her show, 2 weeks, and then. But who knows if she's going to be back on the show. But you have a person whose job it is to question what is going on in the world, what is going on in Congress, what's going on in government. That's her job. She should have a First Amendment right, to do that, just like the rest of us, to question what's going on in Congress. But I will say that pretty soon our First Amendment rights, just what we're talking about, you're going to lose your First Amendment rights to talk about Ilhan Omar and the Rashida Tlaibs. That is going to go away as well. They're going to try to make that go away. And now with the Jeanine, it is where she does have a First Amendment right, but she also has an employer who can stop her if they want to do that. And apparently that's what they've done. And now that we're having Paul Ryan, who is joining the board over there at Fox, he's sitting on the board, prepare to see even more of this stuff happening.
Well, I think the handwriting's on the wall with hiring a Donna Brazil. I
have some questions for her.
Yeah. Well, if somebody doesn't hand those questions to her in advance.
Exactly.
All right. I think we can see where this is all going.
Yes.
One by one, all of these different companies and schools, and they're kowtowing to the pressure that's being applied and forcing people like the judge out. By the way, as a footnote to that, and I have to be careful what I say here, I will just say that yesterday, we were not directly, but indirectly, we're talking with someone who is in contact with Judge Jeanine about raising up some resistance to, what's going on. And I really won't say any more than that right now, because that's all I know at this point. But what I'm trying to say is the judge is sending signals that she's going to try to fight back here. We'll see what happens.
And she absolutely should. And, it's ridiculous. You have CNN who every day talks down about our president to his face with disrespect and lies about him. Oh, but that's okay. They're on the air. They still have their jobs. They're never suspended. But when you say something that has a question, you're questioning something even, you're not allowed to say it.
Well, folks, I'm just telling you, I believe that all of this bad news is provoking people who are fed up and tired and have had it. They've been poked around, pushed around, shoved around far too long. I just feel like that there are people who are saying we've had enough and something's happening. And if Judge Jeanine gets pushed out of Fox, if she has a voice, and she does, and God wants to use her, he'll open up another door. There'll be loss. I understand that. And it's disappointing. I understand that. And it can be discouraging. I get that. But let's just all agree together that when all these things are continuing to happen, Shepard Smith, you talk about another little punk, that's all he is to me. He's a punk. And for a long time, I've kind of avoided Fox News because of the Shepard Smith, because of the Juan Williams, because of the fair and balanced. I'm beginning to see is not so fair and balanced when the other side is a bunch of radicals,
Right. There is not. It's a silent thing.
You're right. So, and people are beginning to catch on to that. So there is something happening. The winds of change are blowing. And I know we usually use that terminology when it's something bad happened. And that is true. But you also have to remember that God's never taken by surprise. He's always got something or someone in position, ready to step into the situation. And so it's not an accident, Susan, that tomorrow night will begin Purim, which is the story of Esther, and how people had devised plots against God's people. And it looked like they had the prevailing winds behind them, if I can use that imagery, but God had somebody already in place, ready to step in, and then, almost overnight, the tide was turned, and the thing that they devised against God's people was turned back on them. And I have to believe that. I have to trust that God has someone, a person, a group, a political pact that's rising up, that I can tell you firsthand knowledge that just as word is getting out, it's like a magnet. People who are fed up over here, they've got this going on over here, and they didn't know where to go. They didn't know what to look to. It's amazing. God is up to something. I promise you. I can't tell you everything that's going on, and I don't even know exactly where it's all going, but I know that God is up to something. So Judge Jeanine, we need to pray for her. That she'll fight, that she'll take a stand, and then God will open up doors for her to be a voice. And if it's at Fox News, great. If it's not, he'll open up a door elsewhere. And anyway, I'm rambling now. But
no, I was going to say what I would love to see happen is Judge Jeanine leave, and people like Sean Hannity and other people who are conservatives whose voices are being diluted and silenced. And I do hope they leave, and let Fox News fall. Because that's going to happen.
That's what will happen.
Yeah, you're bringing in people like Donna Brazile. And I'm sorry, I don't know Donna Brazile personally. I know what Donna Brazile was accused of doing, and as I basically admitted to it. So that's not the people I'm going to watch. I'm not going to watch Fox News, so
No,
they're done.
no.
They're done for me.
I know what Donna Brazile promotes and endorses and supports. So yeah, I'm not going to get in on that. I don't care what your mantra is, fair and balanced or not. Right. If you're gonna silence somebody for asking what I believe is a legitimate question, and you're going to keep Shepard Smith on there spouting off his little conspiracy diatribes, I can kind of see where this is going.
Now, Linda has us down for Cloud Knowles 2020. Now, Linda, I appreciate that, but it has to be 2024 because we want President Trump reelected.
No. I want none of that. None of that. No.
But I do think that, we are in a lot of a hurt here, and we are seeing it every day on what's happening with Twitter, what's happening with Facebook, what's being taken away from the conservatives on these platforms. And we have to figure out another way. And Darlene said, One America News is good. We have to figure out another way to do things because it's not working. The old ways that we used to do, the social media and Facebook and all that, they're going into different realms where they're going to even strangle our voices even more in what they're coming to do.
That is a reality. They are strangling our voices. Yes. Even, this is not a big, widely viewed program, but even a little program like this, they're throttling. They're trying to choke it off. And not that they come in and listen to Susan and Bill, but just the very nature of what we're trying to do here, they're throttling it off. And so, but God's always got somebody in place. He's always got somebody ready to step in and to address that. God's not taken by surprise. And let me say this one other thing. I know we're short on time. It's just been made very clear to me again and again and again, especially this past week, that God will be with us, but God expects us to do something.
Absolutely.
We go back to the story of Esther. Mordecai told her, don't think that just because you're in the king's palace, you're going to slide by and nothing, this is not going to touch you. It'll come to you too. And if you don't do what you're supposed to do, God will raise up somebody who will. I'm paraphrasing. In Haggai chapter 2, the people are looking that have returned from Babylon at the dilapidated temple, the destruction, the walls and rubbles. But he says this, and I'm again paraphrasing. Remember what the temple used to look like and look at what it is now. But if you'll get in there and you'll do the work, I will be with you. And that's what we've got to do, Susan. And we've got to share with everybody and all you people watching and listening. We've got to do the work, because if we start working, it'll inspire others to do likewise.
We have just a short time, but Linda said, serious question. Do you think God is pleased as we as believers are doing more criticism against people instead of praying and speaking to those individuals? I think you need to do both. And I think prayer has to be number one. It has to be even more than criticisms, but I think you need to speak out and not be a doormat. That's just my thinking.
Well, I do from time to time, call of individuals' names. My issue is not so much with the individual as with the mindset, the concept, the what they're pushing. And Teresa was asking, what is your title, Bill, if I can ask? And I'm assuming she is saying in relation to this organization that I'm being involved with, which, by the way, is the American Pro-Israel PAC. My official title at this point is I am on a 3-member trust that is part of a spiritual advisory committee, because this is the only political entity that I know of anyway that has a spiritual core that is, the chairman has asked for there to be a group of men and women who will pray, advise, instruct from a spiritual and biblical point of view. So that right now is the role that I am walking in.
And we have to leave you at that because we are running late. Thank you so much
for being
here. That's okay. Please share this show, and we'll see you again next week. God bless.